That front end. Just look at that front end for a second. Because whoever designed this wasn't thinking about campgrounds. They weren't thinking about highway rest stops or RV parks with plastic lawn chairs and string lights. They were thinking about something else entirely. Something that belongs on a runway, or parked outside a billionaire's private compound at midnight, lit from underneath in electric blue while everyone inside pretends they're not impressed. This thing is called, for the purposes of this breakdown, the Obsidian Giant. No manufacturer built it, no factory produced it, no dealership is selling it. It's an AI-generated concept design, pure imagination, zero real-world constraints. And that is exactly why it deserves a serious breakdown. Because when a designer has no limitations, that's when you find out what design is actually capable of. Here's what we're doing today. Full walk-around, front to rear. Then we're going inside, even though no interior render exists, because the exterior tells us enough to reconstruct what's almost certainly happening in there. Then powertrain logic, then my honest verdict. And stay with me, because there is one thing happening on this vehicle's lower body that I have genuinely never seen executed quite like this on anything else. I'm saving it. You'll know it when we get there. Let's go. Let's start exactly where your eyes go first, the front face. That V-shaped LED signature cutting across the front, sharp, angular, aggressive. That is not decoration. That is a design language statement. That is the designer saying, this vehicle has an identity and you will recognize it from 400 meters away in the dark. Most motorhomes don't have a face. They have a windshield and some headlights loosely arranged together. This thing has a face. It has intention written into every LED line. The windshield itself is massive, nearly full width, deeply raked back at an angle you simply don't see on vehicles in this class. On a conventional Class A motorhome, the windshield is almost vertical, practical, functional, boring. Here, that rake does two things simultaneously. First, aerodynamically, it's redirecting airflow up and over the roofline rather than slamming into a flat wall. For a vehicle this size moving at highway speeds, that's the difference between fighting the air and working with it. Second, from inside the cockpit, that angle gives the driver a field of vision that would feel less like operating a large vehicle and more like sitting inside a very fast, very dark aircraft. That matters. That changes how driving feels. Below the windshield, the lower front bumper section is where the design gets almost confrontational. Geometric cuts, hard angular shapes, additional white LED strips running horizontally across the lower face, structured horizontal intake slats in the center. The overall impression from the front, and I want to be specific about this, is predatory. This vehicle looks like it is hunting the road ahead of it. Not cruising, not touring, hunting. Now let's move down the side, and this is where the scale hits you properly. Two distinct deck levels. Count them. Upper and lower, separated cleanly, each with its own design logic. The upper deck runs an almost uninterrupted band of dark-tinted panoramic glass along its entire length. We're talking windows that span most of the habitation section without a single thick pillar interrupting the view. Think about what that means for a moment. You are traveling through the Scottish Highlands, or the Nevada desert at golden hour, or along the Amalfi Coast, and instead of a wall, you have that glass, floor to ceiling adjacent, edge to edge, the entire landscape moving past you like a living painting. That is not an amenity. That is a philosophy. The designer made a decision that the experience of being inside this vehicle while it moves should feel cinematic, and they built that decision into the glass. The lower deck is more structural, housing the mechanical systems, storage bays, and likely slide-out sections when parked.
The body panels across both levels are strikingly flush, minimal visible shut lines, surfaces that flow into each other rather than being interrupted by gaps and edges. In the automotive world, flush surfacing at this level of execution is expensive and difficult. It signals that whoever imagined this concept was not cutting corners aesthetically, not anywhere. And then the blue. This is the detail I told you I was saving. Running the full length of the lower body, from front to rear uninterrupted, is an ambient LED strip in electric blue, and it is not overdone. That is the remarkable thing. On a vehicle this dark, this massive, this aggressively styled, the temptation would be to go wild with lighting. More strips, multiple colors, a light show. The designer resisted that entirely. One continuous strip, one color, maximum discipline. The result, especially against that polished dark marble floor in the render, is that the vehicle appears to float. The underside disappears. The blue glow becomes a horizon line. The whole machine looks like it arrived from somewhere that doesn't exist yet. I have not seen that level of lighting restraint on a concept in this category. Usually it's too much. This is exactly enough. Now the wheels. Multi-axle configuration. At least 4 rear axles visible from this angle, plus the front steering setup. That's a serious number of contact points, and on a vehicle with the mass this concept implies, you need them. But the wheel design itself, large diameter, dark multi-spoke alloys, is distinctly sport-oriented. That is a deliberate contradiction. Sport wheels on a vehicle that weighs, in a real-world build, something in the range of 30 to 40 tons. It shouldn't work aesthetically. It absolutely works aesthetically because the proportions are matched correctly. The wheel diameter is scaled to the vehicle height in a way that makes the whole stance feel low, planted, purposeful, rather than the tall, slightly awkward stance most vehicles in this class carry. This sits into the ground, like it means to be there. The roofline deserves a mention before we move inside. Flat, clean, with an LED light bar strip running across the front roof edge and what appears to be significant flat surface area running the full length. In a real-world engineering scenario, that roof is prime solar real estate. We'll come back to that in the tech section, because the numbers on what that surface area could theoretically generate are interesting. The exterior alone makes this one of the more compelling concepts I've broken down. The design is cohesive, intentional, and genuinely original. But honestly, the exterior is the easy part. What I think is happening inside this vehicle, based on everything the outside is telling us, is where this gets really interesting.
No interior render exists for this concept. That's fine, because the exterior tells us enough to do some serious detective work. And I want to walk you through exactly what I think is almost certainly happening inside, based on the proportions, the window placement, the deck separation, and the overall design philosophy we've already established. Let's start with the numbers. Based on the proportions visible in this render, this concept appears to be somewhere in the range of 50 to 60 feet in length and approximately 13 to 14 feet in overall height. The habitation section, from behind the cab to the rear, accounts for roughly 35 to 40 feet of that length, split across 2 decks. That is, and I want you to sit with this for a second, that is more floor area than many studio apartments. We are not talking about a motorhome. We are talking about a residence that has decided to retain the option of movement. Upper deck, the living level. The upper deck is where the life happens. Based on the roofline height and the window band placement, ceiling height up here would likely be in the range of 7 to 7.5 feet, which in a mobile living context is remarkable. That's full stand-up height with clearance to spare. And here's why that matters beyond the obvious. Human psychology responds to ceiling height in ways we don't always consciously register.
Low ceilings create compression, a sense of being managed, contained. High ceilings create expansion, a sense of possibility, of space that belongs to you. At 7+ feet, moving through this upper deck would feel less like navigating a vehicle interior and more like moving through a well-designed penthouse floor. That feeling is intentional. The designer built it into the roofline from the outside. The panoramic window band would flood this level with natural light across its entire length. Imagine the living area positioned centrally, a modular lounge arrangement, likely low-profile seating to maximize the window sightline, surfaces in dark materials to complement the exterior obsidian finish. Given the design language, aggressive, restrained, cinematic, I'd expect an interior palette of matte black, brushed dark metal with strategic accent lighting that mirrors the exterior blue. Not overwhelming, precise. Towards the rear of the upper deck, this is almost certainly where the sleeping quarters sit. Rear placement in a vehicle like this is logical for two reasons. First, privacy. The further from the cab, the more separated you are from the mechanical and operational noise of driving. Second, view. A rear-facing bedroom window with that glass philosophy carried through would mean waking up to whatever landscape is behind you. Imagine camping, genuinely camping, in Zion National Park or the Dolomites, and your bedroom window frames the entire valley like a painting. That's not a motorhome experience, that's a luxury lodge experience that also happens to be able to leave. Lower deck, the engine of daily life. The lower deck, based on its structural depth and proportions, would house the more functional systems. But in a concept at this level, functional doesn't mean compromised. Kitchen, almost certainly full scale, not a galley kitchen squeezed into 4 feet of counter space. Based on the lower deck depth, we're likely looking at something approaching a proper residential kitchen layout. Induction cooking surfaces, integrated refrigeration, possibly a wine preservation system given the luxury positioning of this design. In a real build scenario, the engineering challenge here is weight distribution. Kitchen appliances are dense and heavy, and placement would need to account for axle load across that multi-axle rear configuration. But that's a real-world problem. In the world of this concept, the kitchen is full. It has to be. The design philosophy demands it. The bathroom, given the lower deck depth, a full wet bath is entirely plausible here. Not a combined wet bath where the toilet and shower share 28 inches of awkward space. A real, properly proportioned bathroom with real fixtures. Again, if this vehicle's philosophy is that mobile living should feel like actually living, then a real bathroom isn't optional. It's the proof point. The cockpit. That deeply raked windshield and the width of the front cab suggests a cockpit environment that would be, in a near-future build, genuinely impressive. Wraparound instrumentation, likely a digital dashboard spanning the full width. Augmented reality heads-up display technology, which exists in production vehicles today, but has never been applied at this scale or with this kind of screen real estate. Visibility from inside that raked windshield would be extraordinary. The angle combined with the width would give a driver a field of view that most vehicle operators can only imagine. And in a world where autonomous highway driving continues to mature, which is the direction real-world technology is heading, that cockpit transitions. The driver's seat folds back, the cab becomes an observation lounge, the vehicle manages the highway miles, while the occupants live in the space behind them. That's not science fiction, that's a near-future scenario that this concept's proportions are perfectly designed to accommodate. Now, obviously, this is still conceptual territory. A real engineering team would face serious challenges translating this exterior vision into a livable, road-legal interior. But the bones here, the spatial logic, it's sound. And that's what makes a concept worth taking seriously.
Let's talk about what would actually move this thing. In a real-world build scenario, And I want to be clear that we're hypothesizing here because this concept exists in imagination, not in any factory. Powering a vehicle of this mass and this size is a genuinely interesting engineering problem. The honest answer is, combustion alone doesn't make sense for a concept with this design language. Everything about this vehicle's aesthetic, the flush surfaces, the ambient lighting, the clean architecture, speaks to a world beyond fossil fuels. So let's think electric. Or more precisely, let's think dual-mode electric with hydrogen range extension. Here's the logic. A pure battery electric drivetrain at this scale would require a pack somewhere in the range of 500 to 800 kilowatt hours to achieve meaningful range. That is a serious amount of battery mass, and on a vehicle already managing significant weight across its axle configuration, that's a real engineering tension. The solution that actually makes sense, and that real heavy vehicle manufacturers are beginning to explore seriously right now, is hydrogen fuel cell range extension. A substantial but not enormous battery handles daily operation, regenerative braking energy capture, and low-speed maneuvering. A hydrogen fuel cell handles sustained highway cruising, continuously recharging the battery without the weight penalty of carrying enough cells for 400 miles of pure electric range. Realistic range in that scenario? Somewhere in the range of 400 to 600 miles between hydrogen refills, with battery reserve for the final approach to any off-grid destination. Now, that roof. The flat upper surface of this concept, based on its apparent dimensions, represents somewhere in the range of 350 to 450 square feet of solar panel real estate. Current high-efficiency solar panels at that surface area, in a real-world application, could generate somewhere between 15 and 20 kilowatt hours per day in good sun conditions. That won't drive this vehicle, but it will run its climate systems, its lighting, its kitchen appliances, and its connectivity systems indefinitely, meaning that once parked at a campsite, off-grid and completely disconnected from any power hookup, this concept could sustain full luxury living essentially for free. That is the off-grid number that matters, not how far it drives, how long it stays. Pull this into a national park, find your spot, kill the engine, and the solar roof takes over. 3 days, 5 days, a week. Fully self-sufficient, climate-controlled, connected, lit from underneath in electric blue against the desert floor. If someone were ever brave enough to actually build something like this, that capability is not a fantasy. The technology to make it work largely exists today. It just hasn't been assembled in this particular shape yet. All right. Here's where I tell you what I actually think. What this concept does genuinely well, and I'll be specific, is restraint. That might sound like a strange compliment for a 55-foot, double-deck, blue-lit obsidian monster, but restraint is exactly the right word. Most concept designs in this space try to impress you with quantity. More features, more lighting, more complexity, more surfaces doing more things. This design impresses you with editing, one lighting color, consistent surface philosophy, a coherent design language from the front V signature all the way to the rear. That level of discipline is harder to achieve than excess, and it shows. The panoramic upper glass is genuinely ahead of its time for this vehicle category. Not because panoramic glass doesn't exist, it does, on yachts and private jets and high-end architecture, but bringing that philosophy to a mobile living platform at this scale, with this consistency, that's a real idea. That's the kind of thinking that eventually filters down into production vehicles 10 years later. What seems questionable? The real-world width of this concept, if built as shown, would almost certainly exceed standard road lane widths in most countries. Getting this from one national park to another without a special vehicle permit and a police escort would be, let's say, logistically creative. That's the trade-off the designer made by prioritizing interior space and visual drama over practical road compliance. In a pure design exercise, which this is, that's a valid trade. In the real world, it's a problem that would need solving. The one thing I'd change? The rear.
We only have this 3/4 front angle in the concept render, which means the rear of this vehicle is a mystery, and I think that's actually the missed opportunity here. A rear design that continued the blue ambient lighting into a full-width light bar, the kind of rear face that would be visible in a following driver's mirror from half a mile back, would complete this design in a way that makes it truly unforgettable from every angle. Right now, the front is extraordinary. The rear might be anything. I want it to be extraordinary too. What does this concept say about where luxury mobility is heading? It says that the boundary between architecture and transportation is dissolving, that the next generation of luxury living doesn't need to be fixed to one location to feel permanent, that a home can have a chassis, that camping, real camping in extraordinary places, doesn't require you to sacrifice a single element of how you live. This concept doesn't just imagine a better motorhome, it imagines a different relationship between human beings and the places they want to be. This will never exist exactly as you've seen it today, and honestly, that's fine. That's not the point. It's an AI-generated concept. It's fictional. It exists in imagination and in this render and in this conversation we just had. And it's still one of the most cohesively imagined mobile living concepts I've broken down on this channel. One question before you go, and I genuinely want to know, if you could park a concept like this anywhere in the world for 1 week, completely off-grid, where would it be? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this kind of deep dive concept analysis is what you come to YouTube for, there is a lot more of it on this channel. Hitting subscribe takes 2 seconds and make sure you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.